The African Venture Philanthropy Alliance, a social investment ecosystem, is launching its membership network. The network is inspired by Africa's economic challenges and the wealth of opportunities these challenges present to the continent's development. The membership launch is part of AVPA's efforts to be the connector of ideas, opportunities and access to investment opportunities on the continent. And for more on this now, we are joined by Dr. Frank Aswani, who is the Chief Executive at African Venture Philanthropy Alliance, and he joins us via our Zoom line. Frank, thank you so much for joining us here on the late edition. Let's start here. How did the African Venture Philanthropy come about, and if you can just take us back, what actually inspired it?
Thank you very much for having me. I think the biggest inspiration to AVPA's existence was pretty much the fact that if you look at Africa's development and future, we're a continent who, since independence, have built our development on the back of aid and government funding. That is becoming unsustainable. We are seeing that aid to Africa is reducing. Our governments are becoming more broke, and that means there's less money being made available for social investments. And that necessitated a different approach towards sustainable financing of Africa's development and the future of attempting to meet the 2030 SDG targets. So to that end, you will realize that in the absence of adequate money coming in through aid and government funding, we had to look at other spaces, and part of that was to then look at the private sector, because private capital markets have more than enough money. The world needs about $4.3 trillion to meet its annual SDG financing up, and the world financial and capital markets are sitting at about $430 trillion. So we needed to realize that we need a different model, and that's what gave birth to AVPA, which we're trying to chart a different approach towards sustainable development in Africa.
And what would you say when it comes to the continent are the social challenges that you are faced with, and also just share the opportunities for investments, especially in the social solutions or the entrepreneurship space?
Okay, so the continent needs something in the tune of $500 billion to $1.2 trillion annually. If we're between now and 2030, we're going to meet our SDG financing gap. And we are lagging behind even a country like South Africa, which is probably one of the most developed economies in Africa. On the SDG ranking index, it's at about 63.7 out of 100%, which puts it about 108 out of 163 countries. So generally, we're lagging behind. And for us to look at some of this stuff, and you look at a country like South Africa, which we are on course to meet only about 2 of the 17 SDGs, that is scary. It means that people are going to fall further behind in terms of the quality of living and standards of living on the continent. So the opportunities from a social investment perspective are many. And I think we are blessed to be truly in a continent where, whereas 15, 20 years ago, this would have been a curse, everybody would be looking at us and saying, oh, Africa is a dark continent, you've got all these problems. In the impact world, these are real impact opportunities. So the kind of investors we work with in the impact investing space are risk-seeking. They're attracted to problems. So the diversity of Africa's challenges offers some phenomenal impact opportunities for the world to invest in and learn from. So take an example of a youth dividend. We're going to have the biggest workforce by 2050. If well invested in and trained today, the future of the global workforce could be African. You think about things like agriculture and the arable land. We sit on 60% of the world's arable land. In the context of global warming and everything else, Africa, although not blocked from the effects of climate change, could still be able to feed the world with proper agricultural techniques and practices. So there's so much upside on the continent. And where we come from right now, the glass is no longer half empty, it's half full.
And what would you say, Dr. Frank, is the need for socially charged ideas and innovations?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, and I think the basis for that is really grounded upon that we are the generation that's been blessed to go through a couple of crises. And they say never waste a crisis. We've gone through COVID, we've gone through Black Lives Matter, and now we're going through the Russia-Ukraine war. And this has taught us some really significant lessons, that problems don't pick and choose. Whether you live in Santon or Lekki or Lavington or Karen in Nairobi, or live in Alex or the slums of Lagos or Nairobi, these things hit us the same way. So the responsibility to solve these issues are no longer the response down to the government or, let's say, to the development sector. We all have a role to play. And one of the things we need to be thinking about is, in the context of the private sector having the kind of resources we need to mobilize impact on the continent, how do we get more private sector involvement into this space and have them really play a big role in advancing Africa's social agenda? And to that end, one of the biggest things we're trying to advance is really the convergence of profit and purpose. There's this general perception that to do well and doing good are mutually exclusive. And that's not right. You can do well as you make profits. And increasingly, more and more models are coming up to demonstrate that that is very, very possible. So the whole impact investing space in which we play is a bridge between traditional philanthropy and private capital, and seeking this middle ground where we apply innovative approaches to blending grants and private capital in a blended finance structure, or using innovative financing structures, so on and so forth. So that's the space we're trying to do, is to bridge these two extremes together and find a middle ground that collectively does better than either of them would do on their own.
And speaking of the private sector and the collaborations, what are the collaborations looking like, especially when you bring in the private sector as well as governments?
I think one of the biggest things that we're trying to learn is what can we learn from the mistakes we made with the years of aid. And one of the things we must make sure, and especially break the habits of where, when you look at private sector initiatives, they tend to leave the government behind. We've got to bring the government with us, because the government has to create the enabling environment for private sector players to find this room and space to maximize their impact. So to that end, we're big proponents of making sure that we bring governments as collaborative as in all the initiatives we do. In any case, governments are some of the biggest grant makers in any countries, or carriers of grant capital in any country. And right now, the world is not short of money. The world is short of risk capital. That kind of capital that can take high risks in testing new markets, new models, new products, supporting entrepreneurs who are coming up with early stage and growth ideas. That's where we lack money. To build the big stuff, roads, infrastructure, the world generally is not lacking money there. It's really this early stage spaces where we're trying to get new ideas off the ground. That's where the innovation comes in. That's where we're really struggling. And hence the significance of trying to create strong partnerships between governments and private sector, and jointly understanding that the success will come from us working together, not working in our separate silos. So one of the things we do at AVPA, and what's really unique about us, is that we try and break down these silos that currently exist between traditional grant makers or philanthropists and private capital, because we need to bring this together, these parties together for greater impact.
And then we understand that there is indeed that launch, the upcoming membership launch that will be taking place in Cape Town. What can the public expect from that?
I think, first of all, the public can expect some real acceleration of momentum after the launch, because we are going to be bringing together some powerful networks of impact players from across the continent. We're truly blessed to be a Pan-African organization that's trying to advance this wonderful continent that we call home. And we shall be bringing together people from across sub-Saharan Africa. The public can also expect some significant partnerships to emerge from the launch and days thereafter. We are also going to be discussing some really interesting kind of introductions. For example, we're just about to launch a really exciting research that we've done together with the First Round Empowerment Fund and Deloitte on mapping out the state of innovative financing in South Africa. We'll be formally launching it at the launch event in Cape Town. We are going to be bringing together minds from across the continent to really discuss what are the things that we can learn from each other. Because in reality, we're facing and solving the same problem, whether it's in East, West, or Southern Africa. How can we learn from that? But beyond that, through some of the actions that AVP has, we'll be looking at bringing in some solutions from outside the continent as well.
All right, then. Thank you very much, Dr. Frank Aswani. That is Dr. Frank Aswani from the African Venture Philanthropy Alliance. He is indeed the Chief Executive Officer.